So you have a piece of meat and you have a drop of milk. This is classic. This is like the stuff. And the question is like, how far is that impact? What makes for the impact? I think that's the question. And what makes for there not being an impact? And then it occurred to me last night, middle of the night, just there's so many terms in this stuff or implied terms. So just for the heck of it, so Joe, what's a term, if you looked at, if you had a chance to look, what's a term that hits you there?
Efshar l'sochto.
Efshar l'sochto. Okay, fine. And then you got variations on that, right? Heter, Isur, Noam.
Hanan.
Hanan, okay. Always popular. Okay, Lexi. Say it again. Okay, very good. Right up there at the beginning. Miriam, you're frantically looking. What do you got? You got a term for me?
I can't remember the Hebrew right now.
Okay,
but
so no, don't approximate
absorbs,
a term. Okay, approximate a term.
Okay.
No,
it absorbs, but it doesn't emit, and then it absorbs,
all
but
right,
doesn't emit.
so
I'm still a little tangled
Palea
in
and
that.
Polate, whether or not you have that. Yavni, you got a term? Okay, Yavni's off for a second. Isaac.
Okay, Isaac here.
Vishul. What constitutes Vishul?
All right. Yeah, you have a lot of terms, axioms, rules. So what I'm feeling, this is a prep. We're prepping for your, for the official share. And so what else did I have here? Tom Kieker, I had.
Minu mino dvar acher.
Min v'mino, very good. Isur mefafea. Okay, got a lot of things here. So what I'm interested I'm interested in all, but what I think what we should concentrate on is whatever makes the conversation continue, but I'm more interested in what's brought up in the conversation. We'll see if that makes any sense. What's brought up in the conversation, the various principles that are brought up, and how they go. Because you can, well, we'll see. Because then you can get to people like the Ritva and others who start making sure they start banging out together. But nonetheless, you received the Ritva. Everyone received the Ritva from me an hour to a couple hours ago. Okay, so let's just. I'm going to read the Mishnah. Tipas chalav. Okay, I'll try Sfardi. Tipat chalav shenafla al chaticha im yesh ba benotein tam baota chaticha asur nier tekaderi im yesh ba benotein tam baota kadera asur. And Yavni, can you like summarize this Mishnah?
Yeah, if I summarize it, it's pretty short. If a drop of milk falls in on a chunk of something, or like a chunk of meat, then if it has enough to affect the taste of the meat, then that particular chunk of meat is forbidden. And whereas if it gets mixed into the whole pot, then if it has enough to affect the taste of the whole pot, then the whole pot is forbidden.
What's the one thing you can't do or should not do? This is an unfair question. What's the one thing you should not? This Mishnah assumes there's something you're not doing. You have these intrigued. So read that.
You're not supposed to steal. You're not supposed to stir the pot. That's atzila.
Don't stir the pot. Don't stir the pot. I grew up in a family that stirring the pot was considered, that's an expression. Troublemakers stir the pot. Okay, but it definitely came from here. Okay, so Lexi, you read that. Read the first Rashi. Tipat. Lexi, I moved to you. I
Oh,
took it away
sorry.
from Yavni.
Cool.
And
First
moving to
Rashi on the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry, I pulled it up on Safari, but it only had the Rashi in English.
Oh, you only have Rashi and forget that. Yavni, give me a second chance. Go ahead.
טיפת חלב שנפלה על החתיכה בתוך הקדרה על אחת מן החתיכות ולא הגיס את הקדרה ולא נחלק טעם הטיפה אלא לאותה חתיכה בלבד. So the assumption of the first of the Reish of the Mishnah is that it doesn't get mixed in, unlike the Seifa, that you don't. That it
Yeah.
only is affecting the Chaticha.
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
The assumption is that it doesn't get mixed in, and therefore it's only affecting that Chaticha, and that's why only that Chaticha is a Surah.
So, okay, so I guess what I want to say here is that they have to, the Gemara, the Meforshim have to recreate and specify the cases in such a way that you get the conclusion. And therefore they have to make the case as pure as possible.
Right.
And okay, which means, what does that mean? It means, I'll tell you what it means. It means that actually in life, in a psak, it's never pure, it's very, but we should always keep in mind that they're trying for a pure case. What will be, and therefore, no extra stuff. I mean, that's usually how you get a pure case. No extra kind of, right? Because normally someone will say, what if? Okay, you can ask what if, but we don't want to do what if here. Well, here he tells us what happens if there's no what if. Okay, Yavni, continue with the Rashi. Im yesh?
אם יש בה בנותן טעם, באותה חתיכה, כלומר שאין באותה חתיכה לבדה 60 לבטל הטיפה, מיד נאסרה החתיכה, ובשאר החתיכות דקדרה לא איירי תנא דמתניתין בגמרא, פליגי, לא איירי תנא דמתניתין בגמרא, ובגמרא פליגי בה אם חוזרת אותה חתיכה ואוסרתן או לאו. So the Rashi says that what it means by im yesh ba b'naton tam, it means like if there is more than 1/60th the amount of drop of milk as there was in the chaticha that it impacted, and in the and with regard to the rest of the pot, if that is a sul, the Mishnah doesn't say, according to Rashi, and in the Gemara there's a machloket if the single chaticha that has become basar v'chalav makes the rest of the pot asul, or if it doesn't.
Okay, based on these two Rashis, I promise not to do this too much, but I want to do this now. Based on these two Rashis, how would you screw up the Mishnah? In other words, we have a Mishnah, we have a case, and then the Rashi says, well, it's not this and not that, so therefore, how would you screw it up? Yeah, Lexi?
Well, my kind of issue with this Rashi is actually less screwing up this Mishnah, more about it seeming to contradict another Rashi, but that's not what your question was. But earlier in the end of the spring, when we were doing a different sugya, we see Rashi passing that commenting, whatever, that you need both shishim and tam, or lack of tam, which implies that he thinks sometimes you could have no tam and still not have shishim. But presumably the opposite would also be true. So it's interesting to me here that he's using shishim as a stand-in for noten tam, when he seems to see those as not functionally identical in other parts. But that's
Okay, that's good. That's fine. And to answer my question, no, that's very good. And Yavni, to answer my question?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
My question is, if you want to take this pure Mishnah and kind of move it around, what would change the Mishnah?
What would
The Mishnah gives the
change-
case and then says, so what could you do to change the case of the Mishnah? Take
could
the
I
first
do?
Rashi.
Oh, according to Rashi, what you could mix the pot? I'm not sure. I'm still not sure what you're asking.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So mixing the pot becomes a factor, which we've removed in
Right.
terms of this statement, but becomes an interesting factor for ourselves. We find it we find it in the Sefer, but we don't have it in the Reisha, but actually applying it to the Reisha would do that, and it would seem that we would have in terms of that principle, what would be the principle of mixing the pot?
Well, why might we choose to mix the
Now
pot?
what you want. What would
To make-
so what's the principle of mixing the pot?
Oh, maybe to make the relative amount of milk less in the amount of meat. Is that what you mean?
It could be. Anybody else? Joel, you catch what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think you would say it marshals more forces at that point. It was similar to what Yavni's saying, I think. But mixing the pot means that the milk is interacting with more things, and therefore there are more things against it.
Okay, good. And in terms of the second Rashi? Yavni, still you.
Okay, I'm still not sure what about the second.
What I'm
Rashi?
saying is, well, it says here, Ba'ota, you read it. Ima yesh ba b'notein tam, Ba'ota chatika, kolomer she'ein ba'ota chatika levada shishim levata. And if there was shishim,
Oh, and if there was shishim, well, that's presumably. Oh, then presumably it's mutar.
okay, so shishim becomes the major deal. When you would be paskening, one of the first questions you would ask, right?
Right.
Was there shishim?
Right.
Did you stir the pot? That would be your first question, maybe, And the other question would be was there shishim?
Right.
Was there shishim there? So therefore, there's a narrow set of circumstances, that gets us to this pure case.
That's
Like,
assuming
so a
you're
major
paskening-
halacha. That's a narrow set of circumstances to get to it. He couldn't have been stirring, which is often what people do, and there's no shishim in the and both of those seemingly would change the psak, and you know that it would change the psak. I know you know that in terms of knowledge, but we have it here. Continue the Rashi. Near at the Kedera.
I also think it's not. You don't have to like. It's not pshat of the Mishnah that it's 1 in 60 when it says noten tam. That's Rashi's translation of.
That's Rashi's translation of
Benoten Yeshbo Benoten tam.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Near at the Kedera.
ניר את הקדרה הגיס בה מיד קודם שקיבלה החתיכה טעם מן הטיפה והשתה נתערבה בטיפה בכולן. So like immediately, as soon as the drop falls onto before the chaticha can absorb the taste of the halav, it gets mixed in, and therefore it's mixed into the whole pot instead of being received by that particular chaticha.
Last Rashi.
אם יש בה ונותן טעם באותה קדרה, כלומר אין כוח הטיפה לאסור כולן. אם יש בה ונותן טעם באותה קדרה, כלומר אין כוח הטיפה לאסור כולן, אלא אם כן יש בנותן טעם ליתן בכל הקדרה. And so then if they're similarly, you measure the tipa against the whole kdera. If it gets mixed in, if there's enough to affect the taste, then it is asur, and if there's not enough to affect the taste, then it is mutar.
Okay.
He doesn't list the 1 in 60 here. I don't know if he considers
Right.
it different for kdera.
Right. So why doesn't he?
Question, isn't
Who's talking?
Lexi has
I was
an definition for us.
talking, isn't this the Mishnah that's brought up in the Kfela Sugya?
Nachum, is it?
If not, then Because
This mission is brought up all over. There's not a place where
because
it's
if
not
it
brought
is,
up.
I just find it particularly interesting. I mean, if this is harping back on the like shishim versus some other idea of notain tam thing, but like I think this is the one Rava brings up in the Kfela Sugya, where he's like, this used to confuse me. How would you know it's notain tam? And then I heard this teaching about how like leitom Kfela. And particularly if it's like explicitly brought up in that case, that like, how do you know it's notain tam? Well, you have a non-Jew taste it. It's like really interesting to me that Rashi nonetheless is saying that our metric should be shishim.
I don't think it is brought up there.
Okay, I'm leaving that. I'm leaving that. You got to check. Now tell us one way or the other. Let's go to the Tosfos. Okay, Yavni, read the Tosfos now.
But I mean, Lexi's point stands regardless that it's a choice that Rashi's making that isn't explicit.
We have to figure out the significance of the choice. Okay, I'm with you. Okay.
טיפת
Tipat
חלב,
halav.
טיפת חלב שנפלה על החתיכה, על חתיכת בשר, אם יש בה ונותן טעם באותה חתיכה, נאסרת כשהחתיכה כולה חוץ לרוטב. איירי כדאמרינן בפרק גידנסה. פרק גידנסה, ולכך משערין. So Tosfot has an additional condition that it has to be outside of the rotev.
Mhm.
Can't be sitting in it that it gets the drop of. The chaticha has to be not submerged in the rotev, has to be above the rotev. ולכך משערים באותה חתיכה לבטל הטיפה, ולא בשאר חתיכות משום דחלב מפעפע על כל החתיכה, ואין מפעפע מחתיכה לחברתה, אלא על ידי ניעור וכיסוי, כדאמרינן בגמרא אילמה.
Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
Okay, so the reasoning is that, and that's because it is outside of it's like sitting above what's left in the pot. That's why we're only measuring the halav against that chaticha to see if it's noten tam, because halav spreads out within a chaticha, within a chunk of meat, but it doesn't go from one chunk of meat to another unless it is by way of mixing or by way of like being submerged.
Is this important?
Covered.
Is this an important piece of information? Okay.
What? Was that a question? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a question.
Oh, so you asked, is this an important piece of
Yeah. Did you have this piece of information before?
No, I think it is. It feels like a chidush of the Tosfot. It doesn't feel like it's explicit or even implicit in the Rashi, and it certainly doesn't feel like it's implicit in the Mishnah.
Okay. Anybody want to comment on that? Okay. So now I want to go to the Ritva.
Wait, is it a kula or a chumrah? Is Tosfos being mekel or being machmir?
Well, I'm feeling that.
It's an kimta on the Mishnah.
What does that mean?
It's limiting the cases for which it's relevant.
Yeah.
For which half of the Mishnah is relevant.
For which half of the Mishnah is relevant. For which the
Yeah.
And that half is the strict part. He's limiting the stricture. He's saying you can count, in more cases will you now be able to count the whole pot, right?
In
Rashi's case, you'll be also able to count the whole pot.
Oh, I see.
In Rashi's case, where it's submerged, you're also able to count the whole pot.
You could say that there's a chumrah part because, like, in the Reisha, you can take out the piece of meat potentially, and this is maybe fewer cases where you can just take out the piece of meat, as opposed to, like, if it was a lot of milk that you splashed on this piece of meat, you're more likely to make the whole pot asul if it all counts as one thing.
The Mishnah actually
where's the submerging? Where does Rashi say it's submerged?
Where does Tosfot say?
You say Tosfos is very clear that it's on top.
Right.
We know that Rashi kind of says this, but does he say it here?
It's another sugya where Rashi comments about that, about being submerged. I can't remember which one it is anymore.
So why does Tosfos do this? In other words, why does Tosfos put in this more limited situation where it's resting on top of another another piece of meat or whatever it is. Somehow it's propped up. It's on top of a carrot or
It
something.
kind of feels like they care about the mitzvah of the situation, right? That like if you have this piece that's kind of isolated from the rest of the pot, you can better understand how the milk might be noten tam to like that piece and dafka be affecting this piece, but not be meaningfully interacting with the rest of the pot. Whereas if this is like sitting in like the juices and sauce of the rest of the pot, well, in all likelihood, like that flavor will disperse to more things in the
Well,
pot.
you have it according to my limited way, yes. And according to my limited way of I've been teaching right now, right, learning right now, my limited way, it presents a purer case. In other words, it's all these things are like less factors. Let's just give me the halacha about one drop falls onto a piece of meat. Nothing is shaken, nothing is stirred, nothing is covered, there's no other pieces of meat or whatever. So that's what hit me last night. Is that, is this kind of, it's a kind of a method. By the way, right? Notice that in shiurim everywhere, right? The first thing that people try to do, sometimes it's the Rosh Hashiva, Maggid Shir, and sometimes it's the Talmidim, is to throw in as many more factors as possible. So just I want to say, I hate that, because let's see what you can, in other words, let's see what you can get, and then you can, then you can expand. Now you can't, it's not always, because I think Rashi and Tosfot have a substantive disagreement as well. So it's not so simple. I'm a little bit not so honest about Rashi, but nonetheless, that does it. Now, I want to look at the Ritva, and the reason why all of a sudden I thought about doing the Ritva, because the Ritva is great on Hullin, by the way. Why is the Ritva great on Hullin? You know why he's great on Hullin, Joe? Because he had a Rebbe called the Rashba, who did really hard work. And why is the Rashba good?
Well, his organization is good, and he learned from the Ramban.
Why is the Rashba good? Because he had a Rebbe called the Ramban, which is really hard to understand. So the Rashba worked it through and made the Ramban, went backwards. And the Ramban is more understood, at least a take on the Ramban, through the Rashba. The Rashba is much easier than Ramban. By the time you get to the Ritva or you get to the Ran, that's about as easy as will be made for you. If you really want to do the real avoda, go to the Ramban. But if you're doing this kind of shir today, you want to get through it, always go to the Ritva, go to the Ran. Very helpful, okay? Because, this represents that whole Masorah. So now we're going to look at the Ritva. My question to the Ritva is, does he help us? And if he helps us, how does he help? Well, does he add? Does he subtract? But also my question is he helping? Is he helping us? Okay. So let's see how we're going here. Lexi, you want to do the Ritva?
Sure. So starting with the Mishnah.
Sorry, Reish Lamed Daled, which is the left-hand column. Kuf Chet Omed Aleph, Matnitin, Tipat Halav Shenafla.
Yeah. So Hachi Perusho, שאם היו חתיכות הרבה של היתר בקטרה, והעליונה לא הייתה משוקעת ברוטב, נפלה עליו טיפת חלב. אם יש בה בחתיכה העליונה ונותן טעם, כלומר שאין שישים בחתיכה נגד טיפת חלב, והיא אסורה. Okay, so the way he explains this Mishnah, that like if there's like various permitted pieces of meat in this ktera, and the top one was not, so he's saying it's dafka not submerged in the sauce, and some milk falls on it, if in that specific
Yes, but is this so far? Is this?
I mean,
this is from Tosfos already.
Yeah, I mean, no, we didn't get the shishim in Tosfos. This is actually kind of a mixture of the Rashi and the Tosfos in that sense. That we have the isolated element from Tosfos and we have the shishim from Rashi.
He does one more thing. Thank you. He does one more thing. He makes it, you can see it better in your brain. there's a kedera, it has a lot of, and then there's one piece, and on that piece, and no other piece, and that piece not, in other words, he has very nice hasbara. He just explains it nicely. That's a helpful thing too. But you're right. He's inclusive. He has no shame in taking, by the way, in general, no shame in taking from, merging the best parts of Rashi and what you said is important. Okay, continue. The chalk b'kedera.
The cholak dera lo stagile beklipa, b'af al pi shelo ni'er, de lo nemra klipa ele b'chom b'tzeli udemaliach, aval kol shebekdera nivla ha'isor. And we can't just say, oh, let's slice off the little bit where the halav fell, because we only say you can just chop off the little area something fell in the case of like roasted meat or like salted things. But when things are being like cooked in a pot, we assume that they like absorb the isor. And so you can't just like cut off some small part of it and say it's gone.
It doesn't crust. It doesn't, it's not like specifically located. This is helpful as well. Anybody recording this year?
It is recording right now, yeah.
Oh, very good. Okay. Keep on going, Lexi.
Can I just want to jump in? I think that the Ritva, what he wrote there, that piece about that you can't do klipa on it is pretty interesting because, right, this whole Mishnah is about the question of how mefafeh is this milk, right? Does it go only to that piece? Does it go to everything? And he's saying, I think there's a really good havamina of like, well, if it's only going into that piece, maybe it only went into part of that piece, right? Maybe it doesn't go very far at all. And he's saying, no, you can't say that.
Right, but he doesn't use that word. That's very good. Why doesn't he use the word mefafeh, by the way? Does he give us an equivalent?
What did he say?
He says it's nivla.
Nivla, yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so that's good. We don't need to say mefafeh each time. But for us, it's the equivalent of mefafeh. One of the things that we do, I'm being very reflective today, as you can tell, but one of the things that we do, and we have something that it's important to do it, but so you have to be careful, is we take terms that we already know and apply it, and then we always have to stop ourselves for a moment and say, is that a correct application? Here, I think it is a correct application. Okay, Zug weiter. Let's go further.
Okay. Achashna Esra, Ni'er Acher Kachetera, Im Yesh B'Dera B'Naten Tam, She'im Ba Kedei Levatel HaChaticha Kula, Harei Kol Dera Asura, the Chaticha Elyona Kavar Neset Nevela, Utzricha Bitul Keneged Kula. So this is a big thing he's introducing to the Mishnah, is that he says if after this chaticha has already become asur, you then stir the pot. If there isn't enough in the rest of the pot to mevatel that entire chaticha, that's how he's reading the if there's if there's benoten tal in the rest of the pot, he reads that as there isn't shishim kneged this entire chaticha because he holds chaticha tzma neset nevela, which is certainly not clear from the Mishnah. That's.
But where did he get it from?
I mean, he got it in the Gemara. They bring up the concept.
Right.
Of
Actually, so I'll stop and say something right now. Right. It could very well be the Ritva. Rashi, when he comments on the Mishnah, generally he restrains himself from giving you too much from the Gemara. He gives you enough in the Mishnah so that you can move ahead, right? But then you have those before Shem. Who knows? Maybe the Ritva first wrote his commentaries on the Mishnah. This sounds like one of those, this sounds like a Rambam or something. A parish on the Mishnah, and he's giving you everything from the Gemara. He's giving you a lot from the Gemara. So that's my comment. Okay, V'afal Leslie, I can't hear you.
You're muted, I think.
Lexi.
Sorry, what's the kaf yud lamed nun?
Kaimalon, I think.
Okay,
I tried to figure it out. What French word was this?
We
started looking it up. I just think it's Kaimalon.
That makes sense. V'afapisha kaimalan kol she'isor mechamat devar acher lo amru chaticha tzma neset nevela. Hanim ilay b'sha'ar isurim v'afilu be'isur
Avodat Elilim. Avodat Zarah.
עבודת אלילים, cool. אבל בשר וחלב כגופה דאיסור דמיה, כיוון שתערובתן או סרטן, בין לעניין זה ובין לעניין חתיכה הריאלית להתכבד לפני ערכים. Okay, so now he's also adding this issue of the idea that we hold that anything that is asur mechamat dvar achit, there's something else that creates its isser. We don't say chatichana set nevela. So the difference is like this is like, you know, tipat halav versus like nevela touching it or whatever, which is where I think we first see that concept. But he's saying that's when it comes to all other forms of Yisurim, even Avodah Zarah. But Basar v'chalav is different than all the other Yisurim in the sense that it's dafka their ta'arovet that makes them usher, that they're individually permissible things, and the mixture of them is what creates the isser. And so even though this is a davar acher technically to the meat, we don't hold that way like we would with other Yisurim, because it's their mixture that creates kind of a new isser.
This is very, very important. But I have like a naive question. Is there any difference in impact on the other Isurim, davar acher, and now this meat is usser, you know, because it has imbibed it, between that and basar b'chalav right now, in terms of what he's saying? What distinction is he making?
Like, say I had some.
So is there chanan by from davar acher?
I mean, he seems to think generally no.
I think that's correct, unless I'm wrong. I think that's very important. So what happens with the davar acher meat?
Like with anything else, if I had some like truma juice that fell on it or whatever, like I would only ever need like shishim keneged that juice, not ever opposite the piece of meat that it fell on.
What I'm asking is the case of from davar acher. Do we have a phrase for that? Not used here. Do we have a phrase for that? Do we have an axiom for that? A rule, a term, a name?
Like min b'she'eno mino or no tein tam?
Well, that's not what I'm looking for. Actually, that's what I'm looking for. Is that Tom Kikar? No, because it's only Tom. But is it Tom Kikar, or is it's actually Mamushas? Maybe not. Maybe that's wrong. How about this? That the in the case of Hanan, it's oser other things. From davar acher, is it aser? Does it oser other things? It's a question. It itself becomes osur. Does it oser other things?
Well, I mean, the piece itself doesn't. The aser thing in it still has the capacity to do so. Like according to the pshat of our Mishnah, like with davar acher, we don't have to measure against that entire piece that it fell on, but there's still the capacity in whatever that aser thing was. If it's no tein tam to the rest of the pot, it still has the capacity to make other things aser.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Thank you. Go on. Ubitul.
Okay.
I'm sorry. They orchim. Okay, but go down where it says 367.
Ubitul chaticha zo, klomar tam shela, urabanan afilu b'chatichot shel basar shehen mina, Rabbi Yehuda davka barotev racha shebikdera k'deitle b'gemara v'chen ayel pergid nashe v'chol mino mino she'eno mino saleket mino k'mo she'eno v'she'eno mina rabba v'vetlo b'shishim v'alachta k'rabanan. Okay, and he also clarifies that, like, according to the Rabbanan, like they think min b'mino is batal b'shishim, or in some cases doraita barov. But here sitting name b'shishim, and so yeah, the Rabbanan would just think that mevatel this tam, you would just need shishim with the meat. Doesn't matter what kind of sauce you have, etc. For Rabbi Yehuda, generally he holds min b'mino eno batal, but we have this idea of min v'mino v'davar acher, in which in those cases we say that like we basically ignore whatever the heter mino is and see if there's enough in the devar acher to mavatal the isur, then it's batal. And we clarify in the Gemara that like this has to be with like a thin kind of like more like liquidy sauce as opposed to like, I don't know, like a meaty bolognese kind of thing where it's like considered mino because it's basically just like more meat. Whereas with like a more kind of just like liquidy sauce, that's considered devar acher. So for Rabbi Yehuda, in that case, if there was enough of that sauce opposite the piece of meat, then it could be batal.
Fine. How far down in the Gemara did he get? The Ritva here, in just doing the Mishnah.
Pretty far.
Let's look at the Gemara. What?
I just said pretty far.
I know, but let's find exactly. This last thing is what? The difference between Berota of Racha and the Berota of Ava, right?
Yeah, he got near the end of the daf.
Well, you got as far. No, you didn't do.
Near the end of the Amud of 108.
You didn't do Efshar L'Sochta.
Yeah, said near.
So therefore, he's like 8 lines from the bottom. So now I'm asking the group, what did he skip that we need to look at? Go back to your Gemara. What do we need to? What's
the chidush, right?
The first discussion was about Tom. There was Tom v'lo mamasho. And Tom, it doesn't have to. Tom is sufficient. And what does that mean? This becomes a klal. This becomes a Torah klal, a klal in all halachas. Amar Abaye Tama B'Lamashal Ba'alma. In all halacha cases, they're right. Disakadaita D'Rabbanan. In other cases, may Basar B'Chalav my Tama Lo Gamri. Learn it from Basar B'Chalav. B'Ma Mitzinu, usually, right? We say, look, we take it from here, apply it everywhere. So you may say, why don't you do that? The chidushu, it's a chiddush only specific to that case. Chidushu. Afagav deleka notein tam nami. Now, if you make it so specific, it's a chiddush, you would even say you don't even have to do the world of tam. Amalei Rava derech bishul asra Torah. You can read this in different ways, but the major principle here is it is derech bishul in that case, but they're still using it derech bishul, but they're still using it as a halacha of that tam without the mamashut is sufficient to make something, to change the status of the thing that then receives that time. Okay, we have that.
Well, isn't the Messiah derech bishul meant to actually limit the ability to extend this rule?
Derech bishul, well, it says derech bishul. Tosfos doesn't care for.
In other words, he's saying, I think what he's saying is that it is a chiddush. You're right. It is a chiddush, and theoretically, you're right. We would afilu even if it didn't give time. But since the Isser is taught in the language of Bishul, when no time is given, that's not called Bishul. So therefore, even though it's a chiddush, we're going to require there to be a time transfer.
But the way I read it was like Abaye's whole thing was saying that like you can't say that this is a chiddush and we can't learn from it to other isurim, because your argument that like if it is a chiddush, then why does it have the same standard that we use with other isurim? Therefore, like we must be able to learn to other ones. And Rava's that like derech bishul asra Torah, at least the way that like Rashi and some of the others read it, is that like because it is saying no, it is a chiddush, and like it's just that bishul involves the giving of flavor, and that's why it's notein tam. But if it is a chiddush, then you wouldn't necessarily be able to learn from it to other cases. So
right, so that's why Tosfos doesn't like it. That's why I think why Tosfos doesn't like it. But in a sense, it doesn't matter. I mean, It matters. You want to talk about sources, but it doesn't matter because it becomes a principle b'memotzinu for all situations that we can go by time. Even though the specificity in the case of our case, the paradigm of basar b'chalav seems to be very narrow. It's derech bishul. Nonetheless, what does derech bishul mean? In a sense, I think maybe Rashi gives us this. What does derech bishul mean? It means a mixing of taste.
Yeah, but
It means a mixing of taste.
that's Rava. Isn't that Rava explaining why even though they're a chidush, they use the standard of noten tam, because derech bishul, the nature of it is like the giving of flavor.
Yes.
Like,
So-
as in, if that's Rava saying like a response to Abaye, as in like a contradiction to Abaye, like Abaye's argument being, oh, you can still learn other things from this, because if it was really a chiddush you couldn't learn from, why would it use this like more common standard? And Rava saying, well, it dafka uses this standard because the nature of its isser involves the giving of flavor, but it is generally a chiddush. That would theoretically imply, if he's using this as a contradiction to Abaye, that you then couldn't learn this principle to other things besides basar b'chalav. That it still is a chiddush.
Well, it sticks out. It sticks out.
That's the-
No, but
I think-
Abaye is saying it's not a chiddush, right?
Yes, but Rava is saying it is. Who's the one who
Yeah.
says derech bishul esra Torah?
Saying according to Abaye, if it's not a chiddush, you could use it to learn about other isurim.
Yes, but
It's
Rava
not
says
a
derech bishul esra
chiddush
Torah thinks it is.
So,
Fine.
but in terms of this section, what does this section conclude, despite all our problems with it? The section concludes that it's a paradigm. It's a chiddush, not as exclusionary. It's inclusionary. It's learned its own way. But look at Rashi, Omer Le Rav. Noam, can I have you do that?
You can.
Omer Le Rav is about 8 lines down from the small lines.
Yeah, Amar le Rava le'olam em lacha chidushu. Actually, it can tell you that it is a chiddush. Udekamar afogav de leka tama litaser da leka limigamre mizra b'shela. And as for that which you said, that although
That which you wanted to claim, maybe.
that which you Abaye wanted to claim, that although there's no like taste that's able to forbid it, you still can't derive it from the Zera B'Shelah. Al Korchach V'Gufe Gale Kra Ba'inan Tama. Nevertheless, you're forced to say that the Torah indicated that Tam is sort of the metric here. Bidelo Asarto Torah Ela Derech Bishul. For the Torah only forbade, with regard to the way cooking has happened, Shasar Basar Lehitbashel Bechalav, to forbid cooking meat in milk. And you can't do this without giving out tam. So
okay, so that to me proves the way I'm trying to read this section is that they're going to force it through.
But
They're forcing it through that what we want is tam, and tam's universal. We learn it from basar b'chalav. Basar b'chalav came to it in its own way, and yes, bishul is its own thing, and all that sort of stuff. And and there's 3 drushes there, but nonetheless, it becomes universal.
But I think the debate, though, I mean, it's given in the Gemara from the beginning that when Abaye says Tamo v'lo masho be'alma d'oraita, is everyone accepts Tamo is kema masho per that statement. It's just a question: is it d'Rabbanan or d'oraita? That's what really is at stake here.
Yeah, and it seems
Yeah,
like Rava's arguing that it's d'Rabbanan, because Rava's saying that like basar b'chalav is a chidush, so we can't like learn from it that other isurin are d'oraita with the status of tam. That we still go by tam, but they don't have the same d'oraita status.
Or you think you can't derive it from here? Right?
It's a Pyrrhic victory to say,
Right, like you would
it's
have
a
to do
Drabbanan.
mishrat.
Big
to
deal.
describe it.
Big deal that it's a drabbanan. That's my response. That they're forcing it to right. So despite the fact that it's like a dechuya here. Okay, good. So now we added that in, and let's go back down to, here's the other part. Well, I don't know if he said it in the Ritva or not. Amarle Mar Zutra Bereda Rav Mori Le Ravina. Okay. Miriam, do you see it? Do you want to read it?
Sure. Let me find it here. Marzutra Bereder of Mar Le Ravina. I'm sorry, Amarle Marzutra Bereder of Mari Le Ravina. Michte Rav, Kamana Marsh Lishmate, Karebi Yehuda, De Amar Minumino, Obatel. Okay. So Marzutra, son of Rav Mari, said to Ravina, so accordance with whose view did Rav say his teaching? With, of course, our friend Rabbi Yehuda, who said our favorite saying, perhaps, Minumino Lo Batel. Okay.
Okay, wait, don't go any further.
Great.
What has Gemara now done? Or what has Marzutra now done?
Brought back this idea of min b'mina lo batel.
He's given us a new factor. But what does that factor do? Where would you label this factor? I know I'm sounding crazy today. I don't care. Where would you label this factor? This rule does what for us? Go ahead, Yavni. I can't hear you.
It pushes it into a particular, like a fringe opinion, as opposed to
a fringe opinion. No, not.
I mean, not fringe, but I mean, we don't hold that way. That if we hold min b'mino batal, we wouldn't hold hanaf.
No, but I want to know, is a dynamic in this? I'll say it clearer than normal answer. In this whole dynamic of the drop of milk falling on the piece of meat, this principle now introduced of min b'mino lo batel does what for us, Noam?
I was going to say answer opposite, Lexi, that instead of it making it a fringe opinion, it actually connects Rav to Rabbi Yehuda. I think it does the opposite. It gives it a little bit even more credence.
That's good for their relationship. What does it do for I'm asking somebody, I guess, or if not, I'll answer. What does it do for the dynamic? It moves it to the next step. We've been talking about the dynamic of this one piece of meat. The piece of meat is suffused with milk, and there's no 60 anasmathea to the whole piece. Everything that we from the various people. So we got it now, and there it is, But now we see the min b'mino lo batel. Now it can wreak havoc with the rest of the pot.
Well, I mean, this isn't just wreak havoc. The story's over at that point, right? If it's not batel on the first piece, then the rest of the pot is just gone. It's
because of
min b'mino.
Yeah, because of that principle.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that's how it functions. That's how it functions. Okay, good. Again, they're trying to figure out how it works. So this is how it works. They have to introduce. Now, what happens that we've had that principle, right? And it happens that it works very nicely because, well, as we'll see later on, he's got other principles that seem to work together as well. They're building the whole structure of how a pot goes bad, as opposed to saying, let's just throw out this chatichat basar that has a tipa of halav. Now it's very dramatic. The whole pot's going bad. We're in trouble. This is very scary. Okay, now, Miriam, go on the lema.
All right.
Lema pliga.
Pliga ad Rabba de Amar Rabba Kasavar Rabbi Yehuda Kol Shehu Min Umino V'Devar Acher Salach Mino Kami She'eno V'She'eno Mino Rabba Alav Uvmedat Lo. Okay. So shall we say that Rav disagrees with Rabba? And so this is bringing back the from the shir that Joel and Shani taught a while ago. So as Rava said, Rabbi Yehuda holds with any mixture of Min b'mino, meaning permitted and forbidden of the same type, and davar acher, another permitted food thing, you can disregard, or what we do
That
is
it's of a
disregard.
different mean. I mean, right.
Correct, a different mean.
Yeah.
Disregard the permitted of the same type as though it weren't there, and the permitted of the different type, the davar acher, if it's more than the forbidden, then the permitted nullifies the forbidden.
Not wait. So what's going? I have a couple questions. So what are we worried about? Before it gives the prescription, before it says "saleket mino," what are we worried about? We have three players, right? We
Right.
have mean,
The mean, the mino, and the davar acher.
and davar acher.
Mm-hmm.
So what are we afraid
So
of?
can we apply principles of mean b'mino to this mixture of three things or not?
Well,
That's the question.
okay, we're getting there. But anybody else want to add to this? No, you're right, but I want to see what else.
We're worried because we wanted to put Rav in the Rav Yehuda category. But if we want to do that, then this seems to imply, like, Rav's idea that this can't be batal, this is like a mean b'mino situation, implies he doesn't hold like Rava's presentation of Rav Yehuda on mean b'mino of devar acher. So if we want to present Rav and Rav Yehuda as agreeing, then this seeming contradiction is a problem.
If you say mean is nevela, right? I mean, it's usher, right? Mean is usher. The mino, is it usher or is it not usher?
Not us.
Rav Yehuda, it's usher.
It's not usher. However, if you say mean but mino,
According to Rav Yehuda, it's asur.
it becomes asur, right? And then you have davar acher, which is not asur. What's our principle? What's our rule of thumb? Like the oldest rule of thumb. I don't know why the proportion will say there. Acharei rabim lahatot. So you'd have mean and mino. That's two of the three players, and therefore it's asur. And we're trying to look for a way. The rabbis aren't so mean here, right? They're looking for a way to save the pot. And what do? You're masalek the mino. Now my question is, what allows them to be masalek the mino besides authority? I mean, they got to have some reason. You're catching what I said before. You have 2 out of 3, right? So how do you do this? So maybe Rashi will help us. I'm not sure. Where is it? Lema pliga adarava da amar. Okay, Miriam, continue. Down below in Rashi, it's the second wide.
Right.
I mean, in the Vilna, it's the second wide line.
Yes. Okay. Lema pliga adrava de amar beperek yid hanashe. One of our favorite sugiyot from before. She'ena mo'il lo levatlo leisur.
Wait.
Did I skip a line?
Yeah, you skipped the line. Kosavar.
Hold on a second. Let me get the same thing. Okay, hold on. Kasavar, Rabbi Yehuda. Kol min umino v'devar acher. She'im mino kolomar.
Yeah, v'devar acher she'im mino. Right.
She'im mino kolomar min de isur shnit arev im mino uv'she. Eno mino de heter.
Right.
Salat mino de heter. Kamisha eno. Mo'ilo.
Yeah. Kamisha eno. She'eno mo'il. In other words, there's actually supposed to be 2 she'enos there. Get rid of the mino as if it's not there. She'eno mo'il, comma. Between the 2 she'enos, you put a comma.
Okay. Lo levat lo leisur. Demin b'mino lo batil. Below tosefet hu nosaf alav l'hiyot shehem isur. Below yuchal min leachar lerabot. I'm sorry. Ha'acher lerabot alav levat lo. Ella Salakahu, sorry, that's the wrong way to say it.
El Salkehu.
Salkehu, Ke'ilu, Eno. Okay.
Enokan. Enokan.
Enokan. Perhaps I should go back and do some translation. Does that sound good, or is it close to the end?
We got another line. But if you have
Okay.
a translation, I didn't know there was such a translation. Okay. Where did that come from?
No. No. I mean, me translate, not reading
You
the
translate.
translation.
Okay.
Okay, so starting back from the beginning.
Yeah.
All right, Beperakid Hanasha. All right, Rabbi Yehuda reasons in a case of mibumino and another permitted thing that if it's its type, that is to say, the type of the isur that gets mixed with the type of the permitted thing, and the type of enomino, the devar acher, that deheter that is permitted, you take out the type, meaning the permitted of the same type, or mino deheter, the permitted of the same type, as if it's not there, and then mo'il lo. I don't know what that means exactly.
I'm sorry.
Help?
Because she'eno moil. No, again, there's two she'enos here.
I'm confused by the two
She'eno
she'enos.
moil. Because it doesn't help.
Oh, okay, because it doesn't help.
Neither mevatel, the isur. In other words, since
Okay.
it's mutter, you'd say it should be mevatel, the mean. The mino should be mevatel, the mean. But you can't do that. The mean b'mino
Right.
lo vatel. Or
Right.
maybe you say, well, add it to the mean as having two things which are mutter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Below tosefetu. And you can't
Mhm.
say it will give additional power to the mean, which is mutter. Below tosefetu no sapalav liot shneim. I'm sorry. Below tosefetu.
Shneim Isser.
How do you do it?
In other words, it's neither going to be a help nor a hindrance.
Right.
It's neither going to be. We're going to view it as it's not there. So it's not going to add to the Isser and become Isser like the minnow that was Isser. And it's also not going.
Reason why
and it's
we
also
can't
not going to
put
mevatel, is because min minnow doesn't mevatel.
I know, but why can't you use it for the other? He's explaining.
I think there's a whole theory of here of why mino is not batel, not what I would have initially said. I would have said it's not batel because right, mino you can't tell, right? It's all the same time. And you're saying no, mino is not batel because the other mean does nothing for it. So it's as if like all you had is that piece that itself is asur, and it just and there's no other forces there. All the other mean forces, they don't affect it at all. And so all you have is just like an Isra piece floating around.
It doesn't do anything for it because it's elided into the mean, and therefore and therefore it's not a separate entity, and therefore you don't get the two achrei rabim. You don't get the 2 over the 3. It's not helpful in any way. It's not helpful to contradict it or to counter the mean because it's mean b'mino eno batel, and it's not there to go along with the mean because it's become one with the mean. That's how I think it should be understood. After reading it through today 20 times, I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is. I'm sorry, go on. Below Tosevet no Sapalav Yoshne Misur. Below Yuchal. Go ahead, Miriam.
Okay. And so this is what we were just saying. And it can't, so it's neither a help nor a hindrance. And it can't, so it can't combine with the Devar Acher and to an amount that's more than it and nullify it. So instead, take it out as if it isn't there. Okay, now back to finishing in the Hebrew.
And
v'yarbeh she'enu mino shel heter al isur v'yivatlenu hachanami
No, stop there. So in our case, the case that we brought down, what's going to be decisive will be the Devar Acher. If it has enough, it has to have enough. If it has enough, it overwhelms the mean, and everything is batel.
Right.
That's what it says.
Just to,
Yeah.
Well, Yavni, what do you got?
just to, when it says lakehu, it's not saying you actually physically take this thing out. It's saying you take it out of the calculation.
The ilu eno. Mind game. Because it isn't nothing.
And
It's
so,
a coordinate. It doesn't help. Okay?
well, so I just have a question on that. So basically, it's the reason why min v'mino isn't batel is because the mino doesn't add enough different flavor to take anything away. That's what we've been saying, right?
No,
Just
no. In
restating.
other words, we're just here. Here we're just using a principle that we have. That min v'mino, that mino cannot be mevatel the min because it's the same flavor. So this is the same flavor.
Right.
We said it has the
Yes.
same mahut, it has the same reality, and when he's
Mhm.
and it can no longer be parv. If one of the two is usser, then it's all usser. That's
Okay, got it.
and that gives
Awesome.
us our the principle is not derived here; it's utilized here.
Correct. Yeah, I'm just understanding it in a different way now that we're reading.
Right.
Okay.
V'hachanami.
V'hachanami,
So here's this
yesh kan-
v'hachanami. So apply this
Mhm.
whole thing with Rava over here. V'hachanami.
So v'hachanami yesh kan rotev.
Rotev
Sheyuchal
is which one of the factors?
the devar acher.
It's
If
the
it's
bar
if it's a thin one and not a thick one, that is.
well, this we'll say in a moment, right? Sheyuchal.
Okay. Sheyuchal levatel at kol hachatichot haneesrot va'amai oseret.
Yeah, it's probably Yechol Batel Koach Haticha Neseret.
Okay, haticha hanoseret va'amai oseret.
Vamai Oseret. And then they answer. Then they give as you're right. It should work this way. And Rav would agree. Was it Rav Yehuda or Rav? I'm forgetting now. Who are we talking about? Rav is talking about who?
Rabbi Yehuda.
Yeah, Rav
agrees with
Yehuda would
Rav.
agree.
According to Rava.
Except in this case, the broth is not your thin broth that's made mostly of squash and lima beans, but the broth is a meat broth. And they get their way out of it. But of course, by getting their way out of it, they give us a principle that, not so easy to get out of that normally. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break right now. The next parts will go, I think are gonna go a little faster. The Yesh Koach. Okay, 5 minutes, which is up for the next section, the Yesh Koach and the first section. My Kosavar. So where are we talking? We're talking about 10 lines from the bottom of the Vilna. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. My Kosavar. So how does this work? Big principle. We've been talking about, for those who came a little late, we're talking about creating the principles in order to figure out in which cases does the drop in milk do damage, in which cases it doesn't do any damage at all. How far can it go? My kosavar. I kosavar efshar l'sochto muter, achaticha mai nasit nevela. If you say efshar l'sochto, let's talk about efshar l'sochto. Efshar l'sochto literally is a metaphor. You're able to wring out the piece of meat. You wring it out so that there's no milk left in it. That'd be fine. But it doesn't mean that here. That's the visual imagery that you're supposed to have. But what is the efshar l'sochto? Is that you distribute it. You cook it up with enough mutter items. The amount of milk that's in that meat, you cook it up with enough mutter. Talking about the milk that's in the meat. How does that happen? That happens by stirring it, at the very least, stirring it up at the beginning of the process before the milk is able to penetrate. Can you hear me? You have it? Yeah. Before the milk, or you have a problem with me? Before the milk is able to penetrate the meat, and you have a stir that goes on, and therefore the milk is distributed to many pieces of meat, it gets nullified, and that's a case of efshar l'sochto. Is that piece of meat actually okay now? Is it actually kosher? Or is it still devar nevela? It's still, well, it's not. Is it still basar b'chalav? Is it still, therefore, is it mutter or is it usher? And therefore, here's how the derivation goes. Umayko savar, iko savar, efshar v'sochto mutter. That actually, if you're able to wring it out by distributing it to all sorts of meat, cooking it up and distribute to all the other meat, mutter, chaticha, efshar sochto mutter, chaticha amay naseit nevela. What does this whole thing mean when you say chaticha becomes nevela? We said chaticha naseit nevela. It's like a Catholic wedding. It's forever. We would think that meaning. It's forever. Okay? Ela kasabar, efshar l'sachta aser. What must mean is that, I mean, what must be the situation? Efshar l'sachta, it doesn't matter. Even if you wring it out, you cook it up, and all that, it is aser. And then they list the rabbis that are pro and the rabbis that are negative, who say efshar l'sachta is aser, and the ones who say it is mutter. Tosfos points out on the bottom, the last Tosfos, efshar l'sachta mutter, you can't do this on purpose. Ein mevatlim isur chatchila. That's not found in the Gemara, but we have that principle all over. It's all over the place there, which becomes very tricky when you'll get into halacha, because you want to save the pot, but ein mevatlim isur chatchila, can you stir it up? There's much to be said there, okay? Okay? The first year I did Yoredea. Was the first year? Anyway, the first year I did it with the group Yoredea. Yaffa Epstein argued with me 13 days. She argued with me 4 weeks on this. Well, in the case of the Efshar, but you can't do it because Ein Mevatlim Isur Chachir. You'll see it when you get to the posting. Okay? Now let's go to the Ritva. Okay, the Ritva now is on Reish Lamed Chet. Efshar, okay, which Reish Lamed Chet, Ikosavar Efshar L'Sochto Mutter. He first quotes the Rashi, so we can get the Rashi from him. And Noam, you haven't seen it, but come on, do your best. Perish Rashi.
Hold on.
Reish Lamed Chet, guys.
Yeah.
Can you see it?
Yeah. Hold on. We just put your mouse where you're supposed to be.
Somebody else has got to tell you that.
I got it. All right. Ika savar efshar l'sochto mutar. Perish Rashi zal. Isur shenivla beheter. V'natan bo tam v'asro. V'efshar ha'isur hanivla bo lischot mimenu. V'lichlok latmo. Kegon shenafal hanasar beheter acher. Miruba v'nischat v'nechalak sham. Kol ha'isur b'shevela. So this is what we just said, that he is explaining what Efshar l'sochato is, where you basically take the forbidden piece that has gotten a little bit of Isor in it, you cook it up with a bunch of other things, and it turns out that once that Isor gets evenly distributed across all the pieces, it's no longer enough to make it a problem, so it's batel. Im ne'amar shehutar haneasar mipnei sheniflat mimenu kol yisor. So if we say that the piece gets permitted because
in other words, the chaticha rishona,
the first piece, right? The first piece,
or we call that elyana, chaticha elyana.
Right. So that first piece, do we say that it gets permitted because now the isor that was in it gets sent out all over the place? V'nihid asor la'asot ken lachachila lefi she'ein maftilin isor lachachila. But of course, like it's forbidden to do lachachila because we don't nullify isurim lachachila. Mihu diavad shap yardami v'sharinan lechol rishon. Nevertheless, after the fact, it's okay, and we permitted to eat that first piece. Arkan. V'chen katsu Tosfot, and Tosfot says the same thing.
Now, let's see if we get more interesting.
All right. V'divrei tema
B'divrei tema who? Exclamation mark.
These words are crazy. I don't understand them. He'ach efshar lomar sheyeh shum davar shebala isor v'nasar chozer v'nischat mimenu kol ha'isor v'atam shebo v'yachzir shemutar b'achila. How is it possible to say that anything that absorbed an isor and then became prohibited can then expunge that isor and then return to being permitted for eating?
Let's stop for a moment. He says all this. We can have empathy for the statement, but what's the basis of the statement? I mean, he's astonished, it's crazy, but like, I'm looking for something more, not just astonished, but maybe logical or something to help explain it.
Well, I think generally when we talk about nullifying isors, like the isor is nullified from that moment, meaning it never became prohibited to begin with. Here you're arguing for something much more substantial, in which something that was actually prohibited to begin with suddenly becomes permitted. I don't think there's a transformative feature that happens there that doesn't happen in a normal B-tool situation where the thing wasn't problematic.
Why is that different? Why is that different from pork juice that falls into soup, which was usser pork juice, becoming mutter now when you drink that pork juice in your soup?
Because the pork juice isn't becoming mutar. The rest of the dish is, and it just happens to be there.
No, but
Not
you're
bad.
saying,
This is good.
but it's mutar to eat you're saying it's permitted to drink that pork juice because I don't know where it is?
No, it's permitted to drink the permitted thing, and that other thing is just there. It's like it's an irrelevant feature. Here we know that this exact piece is a problematic entity.
Okay, I like that. Anybody else? Yavni, what do you got?
Just to reinforce what Noam was saying, they sort of see it as it's not there, the pork juice. It's disappeared into the other thing, right? So
we do have two cases though of things that have the shem of yisur on them and no longer do. One is potentially something that becomes pagum, right? Might lose the shem of yisur, maybe. Right? But the other thing is like a pot, right? A pot is like you cook a pot with pork juice, and after either forget the nifgam, like you can then cook that pot back up. Yeah,
you can do hagala, and there you have efshar l'sochto, exactly the case of efshar l'sochto by a pot, right? We also have other cases of isser that become heter, like
Nachum, are you going to say this is part of the chiddush? This is part of the chiddush aspect? Is that where you're headed?
No. I'm just bantering about. I'm just discussing the issue.
You're bantering about. Okay. No. I got it.
I'm just seeing if it really is. I'm trying to tease out if it really is shocking, as you asked. Is it really unusual?
It's I'm
trying to see, is there anything else that's similar to it? And Joel rightly points out a pot.
No, but so here is it's not going to help completely, but listen. Divrei temahu hechav shar lomar sheyeh shum davar shebala isur v'ne'asar. I think the important word there is v'ne'asar. In other words, it becomes not just a container for isur. It's that's really maybe it's part. I'm saying now. I wasn't going to say it before, but it's part of the chiddush. This is what the chiddush of basar b'chalav. It becomes ne'asar. It's that's its status, because it's not just a container for something; it's something actually that had been transformed. Okay, I don't want to necessarily have the last word. Anybody else have something on this? Who has? Anybody? I can't see. Okay, so Noam, continue.
Umori. Zal Omer, and this is actually a good example of what you were saying before, because if you look at that footnote, it gives the entire chain of people we're dealing with. The Rashba and the Ramban. Umari Zal Omer b'shem Rabbeinu Hagadol Zal dafilu le'man da'amar efshar l'sochato mutar lo ne'amar lahatir ba'achila hadavar shene'asar betchila. So he says that my teacher says in the name of Rabbeinu Hagadol that even according to the one who says efshar l'sochato is permitted, that's not actually said to permit the eating of that piece that was initially prohibited. Right?
Ella, keep on going.
Ella shenidon bo mihat lahakel sholo ye oto hadavar hanasar choser kachat nevela. Rather, what we're discussing is that in any event, we're still being lenient in that piece doesn't become a nevela, meaning that piece doesn't have the power to make asor other pieces, but that piece is in of itself is still a nevela, or it's still asor.
Well, he's going to continue to explain. She'im
nafal b'mino she'asor kemin b'mino afal pi shenivla midavar she'eno mino o de nave shishim neged kulo ukedaminan hacha. So that if the amino thing fell in, and then it forbade it because it's min b'mino, even though it absorbed also something that's not mino, or there was shishim against it, as we said here. Di kasavar efshar l'sochato mutar chaticha atzma amay nase nevela lasor shar chaticha klal. So if that's the case, why? Sorry. If that's the case that efshar l'sochato mutar is, then why do we say that chaticha itself becomes like a nevela to prohibit the other pieces? Sharei hachalav shenivla b'chaticha kfar nischa kan ve'in bo kedei lasor. Because that one small piece of milk that was absorbed into that chaticha was already expunged here, and there's not enough of it to prohibit it because there's shishim. The whole min b'sheino mino b'shishim batil Rabbi Yehuda, and even and Rabbi Yehuda says that any min b'sheino mino is batel b'shishim.
Keep on going.
I think, by the way, can I?
No. We need another 2 lines here.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to go further too.
It's not chalav, it's chalev. It's chalev.
Oh, it's chalev here?
It's got to be chalev. The whole case we're talking about here is based on Rav, on Daf Kuf, which is talking about nevela, iser, and heter. We're not talking about milk and meat.
We're not talking about
because nobody says milk and meat is efshar l'sochto mutar. It's an important point. We're talking about efshar l'sochto in nevela and treifa. Versus, yeah.
Wait, how can you say nobody says efshar l'sochto? Nobody says that for Basar B'chalav, if that's exactly what we're discussing here.
We're not discussing that here. If you look at, we're not discussing that here. If you look at Rashi on page Kuf, on our page, in Hullin, Kuf Chet, Rashi says, my kasava Rav. And we're talking about the opinion, we're not talking about the tipat halav, we're not talking about the Mishnah here. We're discussing the statement of Rav on our page. And the statement of Rav is talking about nevela.
Got it.
That's an important point. Maybe it was overlooked.
I overlooked it last time too. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it could be. Every time you get something new.
No, but why is it important?
Very important because the whole concept of efshar l'sochto is a concept. In other words, by Basar B'chalav, you have 2 new things. You create the milk, even if you took the milk out of the meat, it's usher milk and it's usher meat. In other words, it's irrelevant that you could separate them theoretically because both of them become usher. Whereas, in other words, milk and meat, when it's cooked together, both things are essentially usher. When treifa comes into contact with kosher meat, so the kosher meat, theoretically, if you get out the treifa, kosher meat is still kosher meat. Nothing happened. But milk and meat does a magical, I don't want to say magical, but does a transformation of the meat. it turns it into this new thing called the Isra Basar B'Challah. And therefore, even if you would afterwards separate them, each one would independently be Asr still. Because you.
Well, we're going to have to continue. Okay, good.
I'm just
Now-
saying there is a distinction. At least we could argue this point, but there's a conceptual distinction.
Okay.
That Efshar the Schokto really applies to. That question is really not a question of Basar B'Challah. We're going.
The aim Ladun, you have that? Where are we now?
V'imishum gufa shel basar sheneasar batchila, and if it's because of the meat itself that became forbidden initially, ha'amar de'efshar l'sochato choser latiro linyan she'ena oser klum mechamat atzmo. And then, behold, you have to say that it's possible to efshar l'sochato, then returns that piece to its forbidden, its permitted state.
What does it mean? She'eno oser klum machmas
You
atzmo.
don't mean, yeah, right. When you say permitted, you don't mean the actual piece is permitted, but it can no longer oser other things.
And what can't oser other things?
That first piece,
The carrier,
right?
the meat is carrier, which had become, and I should have said this about this earlier, the meat is carrier, which that's what Hanan really does generally, right? Is that the chaticha nasa nevela, the chaticha, which was innocent and then it was nasa nevela, itself, its atzmut itself is an isur, and it can make other things usur. But what he's saying now is, when we have the schita, choser hatiro linyan, to the point, only to the point, she'eno oser klum machmat atzma. They could be oser things due to if the carrier is, if that which it's carrying is still there. But machmat, no, it's actually what you said.
If this
It can't be
exists
oser.
within-
It can't be oser other things.
If this exists within that paradigm, though, as in if you're talking about the Efshar Sochto Mutar like opinion within the paradigm of Hanan, I just don't see how those can be reconciled, because it feels like any conception of Efshar Sochto Mutar feels like it's like fundamentally the opposite of what Hanan is, and like
So
why
that's why they compromise. No. You're right. That's why they move back. They say, you know what? It's still usur. It's still usur. The thing is usur, but it doesn't. But its impact is lessened. You might not like it, but that's what happened. No, really, seriously, this is what's happening here. This is important in terms of the construction. We have the thing being usur and the thing having impact on others. And here they're saying, okay, let's try it that way. But we're not finished. By the way, we're not finished. As compared to Rashi and Ikar. Umihu. Okay, Lexi, look at this next part. Noam's continuing to read, but we're at the footnote 412. Umihu. Noam, continue.
Umihu kaimalan de'efshar l'sochato asor. So perhaps, however, we hold that efshar l'sochato is asor. Klomar she'afilu ata dan shenischat v'yatsa mimenu kol ha'isur shebala eno choser l'kmot shehaya ela harei ki'ilu chaticha di'isura. That is to say that even if you say that it gets squeezed out and goes out from that, and that which was absorbed goes out, it doesn't return to the way it was, meaning it doesn't return to its permitted state. Rather, we say that it is as if it is a prohibited piece. V'dino la'asor taroto ki'ilu hu asor metchila briato. And its law, its status is that we forbid its mixture as if it was a forbidden piece from the get-go.
So the word ki'ilu is crucial. And the word dan is also crucial. In other words, it's not exactly the way that I would have said it for Lexi, but Lexi, what it's saying here is, yes, it's still usur, and efshar sochto usur, even if you see everything leave, it's all squeezed out, it has the halachic status. You're done. It has a halachic status, ki'ilu, as if it's still in its impure state from the very beginning, and that therefore it moves over. I mean, the Ritva is moving, is making sure that we're efshar l'softa. We're saying usher, even though its reason for being usher has changed from the milk being in there with the meat to the fact that it acquired, I would call this chazaka. It acquired a chazaka that's not somehow is not mevuta. That's the only way I can say it. It has a chazaka, or it has a shame. It has the name of that.
Oh,
Okay, let's finish this up. What do you got?
No, the next piece is going to contradict what I'm trying to force.
Yes. Yeah. Good. That's why I said let's.
But that makes it even more interesting.
First, take the clap. First, take the clap. Go ahead. No.
Henlinan isor min bibino, henlinan biniv a shishim keneged kulo lolam. So it's totally forbidden with regard to everything. Both these concepts. V'afilu nafal be'elef kedero bezo echarzo, and even if it falls into 1,000 pots, it's still going to retain its forbidden status.
And by the way, if it's usher because of it's done that way, and we've made a status that way, of course, you don't care what happened chemically, biologically, This is an isur, period. We call this an isur. The nivrin,
divrei ha'amoraim, demand sfirale efshar l'sochato mutar, lo amar ela bevasar b'chalav, lefi shetarvadan asran. Exact opposite, Rav Nachum.
Exact opposite, and it's problem. It's not like Rashi. What can I tell you?
So and it appears from the words of the Amoraim that the ones who hold that efshar l'sochato mutar, this only actually applies to mixtures of basar v'chalav, because their actual mixture is forbidden. V'kevan shechazru v'nifredu v'nischat tam zeh mizeh chazru leheter kekalai begadim de'alma. And
wow, this is just amazing what he's saying.
And once they're returned, they're separated, and then the ether and the tam goes out. They're like totally separated, permitted as if they were kalayim.
Like if you take linen.
Stop here. Wait, Noam, before you comment. Noam, what has happened now? Let's bring everyone together here. What's happened?
Well, he's totally transformed our understanding of what it means to have efshar l'sochato mutar. It is a much more limited read.
First of all, it's a contradiction. He quoted the Ramban as saying that he never said the thing would become mutter, just that it would be. It's not really a contradiction. He said that it would never become mutter to eat, just that it wouldn't continue its isser further. And now he's saying if they would be separated, well, if he compares it to kilayim, if I take linen out of wool, and now I can wear the wool and I can wear the linen, they're permitted. So it's not like kilayim. Why is he saying it's like kilayim?
Because it's a chiddush. It's a bigger chiddush than kilayim. Basar v'chalav is not. That's what he's saying here. Basar v'chalav is a great chiddush. The chiddush is it's halachic status, and that status can't try to capture it away. You can't do it.
I really feel like the Rashi take on it, though, the one that Nahum's articulating, feels much more intuitive. That like dafka, even if you think efshar l'sochato mutar, you would think asor with basar v'chalav, because like the mixture of them is what creates the whole isser. And so the idea that you could then just like, you squeeze it out and they'd be totally fine. Like you still have like meaty milk and milky meat fundamentally, as opposed to like, I had a permitted thing and a forbidden thing. I removed the forbidden thing from the permitted thing. Now the permitted thing is okay. Like, I think it makes a lot more sense that basar v'chalav would be more strict because it's the very combining of them that created the isser status to begin with.
But all you scientists will show me and prove to me that we can do it. We can really separate it. And since we can separate it, why are you rabbis so backward? That's what he's dealing with. He's saying that you could, yes, it's possible to be done. And if it's, and you know, maybe we can't do it now, but it's possibly done. Doesn't help. Okay, I'm just
But
repeating
then why
something.
doesn't it help? But why doesn't it help in Nevela? Why wouldn't it help in Nevela? If it helps in
Because
Basar B'Chalav, it should also help in
it's a
Nevela.
stronger thing. It's a stronger deal. That's the power of Basar B'Chalav. Anyway,
Just
I'm
to make
finished the
sure I,
last two
It
lines.
just doesn't feel in line with like all the many like ways in which we say basar v'chalav is like more machmir because of its like chidush status of like, you know, half a kazait and half a kazait combined, and you like erolel shulchan biachad and all those things. Like there's so many ways in which we like say it's more machmir because it's like chidush. I feel like very rarely do we say it's more mekil because of its chidush status.
I think this is a
They
chiddush.
would like to save the pot. And they're ready to save the pot, but they're not ready to save davar ha'asur. The primal sin. The primal sin. Basar b'chalav.
Also, they're probably more likely to be experiencing basar v'chalav, right? Like that's the most common case in which you're going to like have to deal with this in your kitchen. So like practically speaking, if you say like efshar self-tos mutar, oh, only basar v'chalav, you probably haven't actually limited yourself much because realistically it's probably the most frequent thing you're going to be facing, certainly by the time we're at with the rifta.
Noam, the last couple of lines. Aval, the Easter Gomer.
Aval b'isur gamor shenitarev beheter v'asro sheafilu nischat v'nifra mimenu ha'asro yesh kan isur lefanenu be'oto shasro mihat ein ladun bo she'oto shenitarev bo chozer lahatiro. So, but with regard to an actual isur that is mixed with heter and it prohibits it, so this is just a normal tarovet case. Even if the isur is squeezed out and it separates from the isur, you still have the isur in front of him, in front of that heter piece, and it's still, and we still judge it to be, we still give it the status of something that was, we don't give it the status of something that was mixed and returns to be permitted, meaning in that case, it stays forbidden.
Good.
So wait,
Good. Any final comments from anyone? No, do you have any final comment? No.
So is this to say that there are two different standards for efshar l'sochato mutar, right? Like basar v'chalav, when that happens, it's mutar, but for a normal tarovet case, it's not, except by saying that it doesn't make other things asur.
Well, that's big. That's big.
Wait, can I
This is why Nachum keeps on talking about pork juice and all his examples, because that's Easter Gomer. I'm sorry, Joe.
Well, I want to make sure I understand this, right? He's making a claim that because even if Shal Sochto is the case for something that had an Isur mixing with a Heter, when you uncouple the two of them, you still have an Isur that exists, and therefore the piece itself is always Asur as well, even though it's a piece of Heter originally. But with milk and meat, because there's no, if you can separate them, there's no Isur, right? Once they're separated, then neither of them is Asur anymore. And I don't understand that logic that he makes. Like, why is it because the Isur is in front of me still that therefore the piece that was at one point infected but no longer is still Asur? I don't get that next step.
I think Lefanenu, I'm sorry, I read it what I said earlier. It achieves a chazaka. I'm using the word chazaka now. It achieves certain in front of us. We saw it, and now all of a sudden you're going to do. Listen. It has to be said. What I'm saying, my argument has to be said loudly and with incredulity, because it's not exactly. Because in a sense, it's almost a social dimension. It achieved a chazaka. That's actually, I think, what it's saying. It achieved a certain status, and we're not going away from the status. That's as far as I can go.
Okay.
In front of that. Anybody else? Okay, I want to do one more thing with you. Go to, if someone could get rid of the Ritva right now, let's go to on Kuf Chet Amid Bet. Ve'efshar l'sachto atzmo tanaihi. Okay, fine. So let's see. Yavni, you've read earlier, but let's try this out again.
I didn't catch where on the page.
So difference the middle of the page or the last third of the page, and it says ve'efshar l'sachto atzmo. That whole thing of efshar l'sachto tanaihi. What's this really about? Where does it come from?
First one on the line is Tanaihi.
תנאי דתניא, טיפת חלב שנפלה על החתיכה, כיוון שנתנה טעם בחתיכה, החתיכה עצמה נעשית נבלה, ואוסרת כל החתיכות, כולן, מפני שהן מינה, דברי רבי יהודה. וחכמים אומרים,
explain it, yeah.
First opinion, we have a machloket tanaim, and the first opinion is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that says that the drop of milk that fell on the piece of meat, because if in the case that it gives the taste, that it affected the taste of the chaticha, the piece of meat is made is given sort of the status of nevela in that it makes the rest of the chatichot, all of the rest of the chatichot, asur, and we don't even ask the question of. And it can't be batel because it's min b'mino, because they're all pieces of meat. Did I get it all?
Yeah. Chachamim
אומרים עד שתיתן טעם ברוטב ובכיפה ובחתיכות, and Chachamim say no, it doesn't make it. It doesn't make the rest of the chatichot asur until you can taste the milk in the sauce and the rest of the contents of the.
But if you can't.
And if you can't taste it, then it didn't make the rest of the parasol, although it might have presumably still made the original chaticha asur.
Look at the Rashi Chachamim Mamri Ashitein Tam, and that's the first of the.
Chachamim אומרים עד שתיתן טעם וכולי, כייסר כדעתך דעתפה קיימי עד
Atipa kaimi.
Atipa. What? Sorry?
They're going back to the tipa itself.
שהטיפה קיימה עד שיהיה בה כדי ליתן טעם בכולם, אין כאן איסור אפילו בחתיכה ראשונה, מפני שהוא חוזר ונסחט. So Rashi says, if you think that we're talking about the original droplet having enough to give taste, then you have to argue that that even the original piece is not made asur because we've come up with the idea that it's mixed in together. No.
Kasal Kadaitha means at this moment we are thinking.
Okay.
It's like it's like saying havamina.
Okay.
Our havamina now is
that Hullin, אין כאן איסור. Oh, so he's saying, but he's still saying, he's still saying that now we think that because it got mixed in, then even the original chaticha, unlike what I was saying, even the original chaticha would not be asur because he even uses the language because it like returns and gets squeezed out of it in getting mixed into the rest of the dish. So it's on the chaticha, even though at one point in time, the chaticha was asur before it got mixed in, presumably.
And so here for that, in other words, once you have this notion of nischat, right, then then it's very strong. In other words, this is the strongest affirmation of nischat. No special privileges to the chaticha el yonah, the chaticha rishonah. right? If Nischad happened, it happens, and that's like one of the modes we were feeling here. And
This is
it's a hava mina right now because they're going to have trouble with that.
right.
To try to get down to which way we're going to paskin and not necessarily demolish fully the other side. And one way of doing it, we did it in terms of compromises, but the other way of doing it, I think, is right now, is we're going to say is, well, what's the situation? What's the situation? Not that it'll be a total resolution, but it'll be helpful. Now you go, Omar Rebbe. And this is a big deal, right? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Okay, it's coming down to Paskin this out because this machlokes has been going on for a while. Amar Rebbe.
אמר רבי, נראים דברי רבי יהודה בשלא ניער ושלא כיסא ודברי חכמים בשניער וכיסא. Sort of bringing it back to the flavor of the Mishnah. It says so Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, the more machmir opinion, seems right in the case where it wasn't stirred and it wasn't covered, and the Chachamim seem right in the case where it was stirred or covered.
Thank you for mentioning the Mishnah. That makes sense. That makes sense. But they can't do it because it doesn't make sense. Therefore, the Gemara continues with the question. My
lo nier velo kiseh.
Yeah, how can you say that?
Right.
Because ilema
lo nier klal velo kiseh klal מבלה בלוע מפלט.
מבלה בלה?
מבלה בלה, מפלט לא פלט. So the original chaticha absorbed it and it didn't let it out.
And so therefore you don't have the problem, it's no good, your solution's no good because then it's just
therefore
standing on itself.
exactly. It wouldn't also the kol chatichot. It would just also itself. The Mishnah, you can't explain the
now
right
the next line is crucial in terms of how they're figuring out the Ella.
ואלה לא ניער בתחילה, אלא בסוף. ולא כיסא בתחילה, אלא בסוף. So it had time to be absorbed into the chaticha, and then it was mixed in or covered.
And then it was near, right? And then it was near, and then you get. What do you get out of that?
Then we can say all the pieces are usher because it went into that piece for a while, and that piece became usher long enough, and then you covered it and you ruined it.
Right.
Because you spread it out by covering it.
Keep on reading.
Sorry, I lost my place.
Towards the bottom.
In which case, it both got absorbed and let it out.
In other words, what are you saying? Amai is really a question on this whole notion. Not sure.
Of why Lonier Betchila work and work. It's like who cares if you stir at the beginning, you stir at the end, it goes in, it goes out. So it should be that all the things in the pot against whatever went into it. Like, why do we care?
It should all be permitted.
Mm-hmm.
It should all be, but you say, right? Because Savar, and this becomes an incredible answer. Efshar.
Kesavar efshar lesochto asur.
Stop there.
Efshar
lesochto is asur. How does that answer? This is like a dogmatic statement. That's what we need Rashi to explain it. Efshar lesochto asur. But why? In other words, it should be mutter. In other words, what we had here is that we had tremendous amount of firepower showing us that everything should be usher. A lot of reasons why things should be usher. Here they're saying everything now is mutter, but here he's saying is Efshar l'sachto was still usher. Look at Rashi. Rashi, I think, is great. Kasavar
efshar l'sachto asur mipnei shekula na'asit isur.
Yeah, by the way, I'm sorry. Shekula. That's the chiddush here. I'll be your speaker. Mipnei shekula na'asat isur. Go on.
וכל הנסחט ממנה, כולה, the whole חתיכה.
Right.
אסור, וכל הנסחט ממנה אסור, וכל הנשאר בה אסור. וכיוון דאף טעם בשר שבה נאסר, וכיוון דאף טעם בשר שבה נאסר חוזר וחוסר האחרות,
ואוסר.
חוזר ואוסר האחרות, אפילו הן אלף דמין במינו לא בטיל.
What's Rashi trying to do here? We're going to reread the Rashi in a moment. But what's, besides for Yavne, Eddie, what is Rashi trying to do? What's his attempt here? He's giving a hesber that's going to do what for us if he's right?
You don't want me?
Oh, go ahead, Yavne. Tell me.
He's explaining the Machmir opinion, right?
Okay. He's explaining how Efshar L'Sachto can never be considered mutar. That which the Ritva, quoting his teachers, do on the basis of how can it be? You know, who heard of such a thing? It's impossible. He's now trying to, I think, give an argument. You got to take this as an argument.
Wait, but he's
Efshar L'Sachto Asur is the only way of looking at it. Even if you say Efshar L'Sachto, why can't you say it's gone? Why can't you say the mutter part? I'm telling you, you'll understand it. Read it one more time. Kasavar Efshar L'Sachto Asur. We're reading it again.
אפשר לעשות אסור, מפני שכולה נעשית איסור, וכל הנסחט ממנה אסור, וכל הנשאר בה אסור, וכיוון דאף טעם בשר שבה נאסר, חוזר ואוסר האחרות, אפילו הן אלף דמים במינו לא בטיל. So, but he's explaining, right? What the Ritva was doing was upset about was the explanation of the Efshar L'Sochto Mutar. He was saying, that's what he was saying, was like, how could that be? This is explaining the Efshar L'Sochto Asur.
Okay, good. Anybody want to add to this? Anybody got something here?
I mean, I think it's also. Oh, sorry, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna ask, can you only hold Efshar L'Sochto Asur is if you hold Min B'Mino Lo Batel?
Evidently, good. I like that. Evidently, that's part of what he's saying.
I think the tour holds like that. We're going to see.
Yeah.
But no, they're going to argue against it. They're going to argue against it. You're asking an excellent question, and there's an argument about this question.
But I'm trying to get the Shita down here. Efshar L'Sochto Mutar is hard. It's hard to. These are absolute positions. One position, that's on its own, Efshar L'Sochto Mutar is you separate the two, they're done. One way of bringing it back to Efshar L'Sochto Asur is to crawl back, and that's what I said. A halachic opinion. Once you got a chazaka, it's that way. But here, I think what they're saying is everything about what took place is about Isur. There's nothing here. The Isur is absolute. There's nothing, the Kula, everything had become Usur. There's no heter anywhere. Unless you want to say you did something later on. But in the meantime, everything you did, and now go to Noam, everything you did, including the Min B'Mino, its impact. Maybe I should try to even say it that way. Even if you say the source has changed, the impact has continued, and the impact has been tremendous. Anyone buy this? No one buys it.
By what?
by the fact is that you have here a convincing argument of why Efshar L'Sachto is Asr.
Sure.
I mean,
And what
it
it's
just,
saying is it's only dealing with Isur. There's no heter that ever came involved here. No heter emerges into the story. Oh, you're saying it. I'm trying to. Efshar L'Sachto, you're gonna wring it out. You're gonna do that, but nothing there ever experienced the notion of a heter emerging in. Anyway.
I mean, it just really, to me, feels like it's about whether you're, at the end of the day, interested in like what is physically in this pot and how much Isser is currently present, or more about kind of like the metaphysical like status changes that occur along the way, right? And that like Efshar L'Sachto Mutar seems to be like people saying, in reality, at the end of the day, we believe that like this Isser flavor has now been dispersed. This amount is spread throughout this large quantity of things. And so it's like, fine. Whereas like Efshar L'Sachto Asur thinks that we think like things undergo certain like fundamental changes in their status that are irreversible. And so after a certain point, we don't really care about what the physicality of this mixture is anymore. We care about the fact that we think there's a certain like process that goes beyond the physical that happens. And like, it doesn't really matter if at the end of the day, the like Isser, what was the initial Isser is dispersed. Like we think these changes we can't observe happen.
Okay. We'll end with this. There's the other Omid is very good. If you have a chance, take a look. And right after the Chag of Sukkot, we start the real work. Enough with this easy stuff. We now look at the halachic material, which is fascinating and deep. If you have a chance, we start with what, Simon?
Tzadichet.
Tzadichet. And which is terrific. And I think there's a preparation here. And I want to say it's a tough time for a lot of people right now. So a lot of people feel like they're Efshar L'Sachto. They've been wrung out, and it's really a hard time. And I think many of us have occasion to feel this. I don't mean this rabbinically. I just mean this really. And so our obligation is to help other people. We'll get benefit from it, but you have to give people chizuk. Even though I think we really do paskin Efshar L'Sachto Asur, I say Efshar L'Sachto, we're all wrung out. In the end, mutter. In the end, it will be well. And if anyone needs any corny eitzes from me, I'm happy to give them, even an eitzah tova, but even a corny eitzah. I think, and I think part of what you can look forward to is that this will be very stimulating material. The purpose of the post scheme is, how do you do this in action? And our purpose is, how can you learn this and you'll put this in action as well. So, Chatima Tova, and good to your only good things. It's wonderful to be, I'm speaking for Nachum. I won't speak for Nachum. It's wonderful to be with Nachum and all of you, and Nachum would say, it's wonderful to be with all of you as well. Okay.
I agree.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. Be well. Shana tova.
Shana tova.
Yeah.